Hello and welcome to the Deep to NBA podcast. My name's Sean and joining me as always is the one and only Dante Boff and Miss Bofferman. How are we?
Sean, I'm so good. How are you?
I'm good. But just before we kick off the podcast, we're joined by a third person, friend of the program, Shmee. Shmee, welcome to the Deep to NBA podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it only took us 173 episodes. But a day one right here. Day ones, for want of a better word. But Shmee, housemate of the program, has been watching a little bit of basketball. Obviously, living with me, the basketball is on the TV. And Shmee's also, a fan of the Instagram personalities of the basketball players. And she told me something the other day while we were watching Warriors versus Sacramento, which we'll talk about later. And then as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And then I was like, if she's around at the start of the podcast, she has to repeat this. And I just want to get Dante's thoughts as soon as she says it. So
I'm very curious, Shmee.
Take it away.
So, I was saying to Sean the other day that Klay Thompson is my little baby boy. Like, he just gives off cute little baby boy vibes.
He gives off cute little baby boy vibes.
Yeah. But then... yes, that's exactly right.
Okay.
But then... Steph Curry gives me zaddy vibes.
Steph Curry gives you zaddy vibes.
Yeah, exactly. So now Klay Thompson has become my baby boy and Steph Curry has become my zaddy.
You've got your own little, Warriors family.
Exactly.
And obviously...
And Aisha's the queen
Curry, yeah.
of all of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm shocked by that. If anything, I would say that Klay gives me the zaddy energy.
Really?
And Steph gives me the baby boy energy. Steph gives me at church on Sunday morning. He's like a little church boy.
I can see where you're coming from with that, but in my mind,
he's got the white girl lightning bolt tattoo on his wrist. That's his only tattoo. He's got one and it's a little lightning bolt.
Oh, I know, but I don't know. Clay's just such a little baby.
Little baby.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, that's it.
All right, thanks, mate. Ciao.
Well, that's one way to kick off episode 173.
And this is another way. Oh.
Now we're podcasting.
All right, well, that seems to have taken up the slot of little story before we start the pod. Did you have any you wanted to fill, or should we get right into the business end?
No, let's bloody jump into it. But before we...
That doesn't seem like jumping right in. Oh, yeah, we've got intros, yeah.
Yeah, we've got intros. Before we do, just a word from our sponsor. No. You had something go up on the deep2.com this week. The deep2.com, is it that simple?
It is. It is
actually that simple.
Where
you can find original long-form articles and journalism by us and a suite of our contributors and close friends?
It's like you know it yourself.
That's crazy that you can find all of that plus our podcast at the deep2.com. You had an article about the Cleveland Cavaliers go up during the week. Mm-hmm. Banger, if I do say so myself.
Thanks,
so
Dante.
You can find that, as I mentioned, at the deep2.com. And what did you tackle in the article? Give the people a bit of an overview of that.
I thank you again for the kind words, but I wrote about the Cleveland Cavaliers, who at the time of writing were 8-1. As with almost every mid-season article you write, of course the team loses the next game in sort of disappointing fashion. But the 8-2 Cleveland Cavaliers are second in the Eastern Conference. And they look really good. They've been winning heaps of games without Darius Garland, who really might be their
all-star.
Might be their best player. Donovan looks really good, but Darius was the engine that powered that team last season. And I just I don't want to give it away too much. Obviously, I want you to go out, check it out, and read the article if you haven't already. But I say okay, this is cool. They look like they're going to be a solid playoff lock. It's very early, but how is this team going to fall lower than the 6th seed? But just how viable are they going to be as soon as they hit the playoffs? And are they going to be a happy little team that gets in there, loses in the first round and goes, oh, well, we tried? Or can they actually make a little bit of noise?
They're actually going to be a force.
Yeah. I'll say spoilers. I think they will be a force, but find out why I think they're actually going to be a force in the article.
Wow. Okay, so jump back onto the deep2.com for that. And something that we had come out last week, which has been doing numbers, as the kids say, is the second edition of the Deep 2 Film Room, which came from our friend and co-host of the Jeff Van Gundy NBA tribute show, Lucas Petridis. His video on the Minnesota Timberwolves offense. how they're incorporating their new Twin Towers look, among other things, including an unhappy and malcontented Anthony Edwards, is up on the website and on YouTube. So jump over to YouTube and give that a look. Lucas brings his signature flair and a basketball knowledge forged in the fires of over 15 years of experience and love for the game. So that's what we've got going on. That's our little admin.
Also, just on Lukey's video, they're talking about the Timberwolves. They've only gotten worse since that video was published, and it's only made him look more right. And I don't think we're going to talk about it today, but I actually want to bring it up. Did you see that play where Anthony Edwards just stood there, hands on hips?
Yeah.
Someone came and set a screen for him, which was like clearly a decoy because he wasn't involved in that play at all.
It was McDaniels came and set the screen for him, and then was like, actually, this guy's not fucking moving, and then he just cut into the gate, and he got the ball.
But also, like, really good reaction times. Like, you know, we'll talk about Edwards, but like, credit to McDaniels for. And I think who's that small point guard who's on a minimum who shouldn't be? No, no, it is McDaniels. Sorry, there's two. There's two McDaniels.
Yeah, but they're both big.
Nah, who's the small guard?
Jalen
McLaughlin.
Oh, Jordan McLaughlin.
He also Jordan McLaughlin also went up. And credit to him for running up to this dude, being like, okay, we're going to set a screen. He's not moving and immediately just bolting off. Like,
yeah,
I would at least sit there and be like, move the fuck, man.
So, just to play devil's advocate, is that great, like, on-court IQ? Or has he seen this from Ant in practice and was like, fuck, he's doing it again, I'm not sticking around to find out, and he just bolted?
You know what, I actually didn't even think about that angle, and it's so much more worse. Holy shit. Yeah, true.
Alright, well, we'll get into Edwards and the Wolves a little bit later on, but let's kick things off with a news-heavy episode today.
Mm-hmm.
Something that's near and dear to my heart, but in a negative way. Is there like a negative version of near and dear, like near and fear? Something that's near and fear to my heart is a report coming from Brian Windhorst of ESPN that Cam Johnson will be out for 1 to 2 months after a meniscus trim.
Emphasis on the trim.
Emphasis on the trim. Now, meniscus, it's always difficult. It's not as bad as an ACL, not as bad as a full knee. But it remains to be seen whether, you know, someone who does a meniscus is going to bounce back to the peak of their athletic powers like I did after my meniscus tear, or whether they're going to go the way of Derrick Rose and never quite be the same. And, you know, this is the first time that I've really been able to say this, but I think that my rehabilitation process and the way that I approached it, I can really be a role model for Cam Johnson through this period. So, Cam Johnson, if you're listening and you want to reach out, you know where to find me.
So Cam, obviously in a career year, he was elevated sort of dramatically into the starting role. Dramatically only because of the guy he replaced kicking up a storm, but Cam Johnson was averaging just around 13 points a night or shooting 43.1% from the 3-point line. Was just doing exactly what you wanted your starting power forward to do, especially on your team where you're getting so much more from other positions. He was stretching the floor, he's playing good defense. He's a very tall body and he's a very athletic body. So this really sucks. Torrey Craig, since he has assumed the starting spot, has had like massive numbers of 5 points, 1 3-point made, 3 points, 1 3-point made, cheeky 1 rebound, 1 assist. Like you just can't get that sort of like. You know how I've spoken about in the past where you just get these skills that are just higher than the game. Like Cam Johnson is one of those shooters where it's just like he is just a better shooter than almost every single human being and you can't really quantify it. So this is definitely going to suck for the Phoenix Suns. But the thing we should definitely talk about is the fact that it is a trim. He's not out for 12 months. They've been able to, and I think it depends on where it is actually broken, the meniscus. I'm not a doctor, but yeah, it does depend on where the meniscus was snapped. So he will come back. He will be better than Torrey Craig when he does come back. I don't think, because it is the trim, I don't think this hurts your title chances majorly. I think this is very much like you are still a title contender. You're still going to be competing for titles. It should all be fine. But it does just suck for a guy heading into restricted free agency. He obviously had the offer on the table. He wanted Mikal Bridges' money. And you couldn't have seen him getting too much more than Mikal Bridges' money. So I'm going to guess that he was sort of pinching pennies being $10 million in this case. But it is just a bummer for a guy who this might be his only payday. He's 27 years old, obviously an older rookie. This is his fourth year of his rookie scale deal. So it's just such a bummer that he might not get as much money as he once would have had and definitely deserves.
And the difficulty for him, like long term with the next contract, is coming back after the trim. You're back on the court. Your rehab is actually a lot shorter than if they repair it and stitch it up. That's why you're able to return, and you'll be in a shorter ramp up. And like you say, like he'll kind of by like February, he should be back, swinging and ready for our stretch run. But the trim leaves you open to way more like problematic and persistent issues down the line. For his basketball career, we're talking like increased chance of a significant tear happening again. And for his life, we're talking like early onset arthritis. So he is obviously making the bet, saying, I want to like get to free agency having had this season, showing everyone that I can do this at a starter level, but in a cruel way. People looking at this and saying like, well, you've just come back and say that he averages 15 points a night and shoots 40% from three for the rest of the season when he comes back. Like, he's killing it. He shows that he's worth, $25 million a year or whatever he wants to get paid.
Yeah.
If that's the case, teams aren't going to want to offer him that 4-year deal because they're like, well, you'd be worth it for 1 year, 2 years, maybe 3 years. But like in the fourth year, like, are we confident that at age 31, 32, your knee's going to be holding up? And the answer is going to be no. So I think even if he gets that average annual value in the contract he wants, it'll be over a shorter period of time. I mean, if he got a 2-year, $50 million deal, it's life-changing money. So let's not like turn our noses up at that. But it is in terms of a guy who was looking for 100 or 110 over 4 years. His one chance, like you say, at a big,
just to lock up the years,
secure payday, like it's disappointing.
But you also have to think the fact that he's opted here for the trim, and I'm sure the press release will say, and I'm sure Cam Johnson's people will say, hey, he just wants to win an NBA title, he wants to get back out on the court. But there's got to be, maybe I'm putting too much stock into the business dealings of the NBA, but maybe there's got to be some human element where it's like, hey man, if you take this risk and you get this trim, we'll sort you out.
There might very well have been like a wink, like we'll.
Like James Johnson seems like he's rewarded all of his players, apart from someone who I'm going to mention in a couple of seconds.
Well, he's rewarded blokes that aren't even his players. Landry Shaman's making $11 million a year.
But let's talk about him now. This came out in the same report from Brian Windhorst, and obviously people say, oh, no Cam Johnson. Well, who's his backup? Torrey Craig, as we said. But is there anyone else on this roster who might be able to step up and play starting minutes? Jay Crowder obviously is away from the team, and one of the reasons he decided to take leave from the team and request a trade, as well as tweet in all capitals, is because he wanted a starting role. He denied that, but it has to have played some factor into it because he also wanted to sign a contract extension, and I'm sure his contract I'm sure any possible offer would get much smaller as soon as he's not a starter. But immediately after this report came out that Cam got the trim, is going to miss time, there was a follow-up report that says that Jay Crowder will not be returning despite the depth issues, which, like, I feel like this is such a crazy situation that Cam Johnson actually has a major knee injury. Like, Jay Crowder can come in and maybe he's frayed the relationships, but he can be the superhero that comes in, scores his 9 points a game and like plays fine defense, and it's like, oh, he proves that he's still worth it. Maybe he's not worth it, but at least you must think that he thinks he's still worth it, and at least this is a runway for him to start. It's a little bit of a bummer that he's not coming back for a good team that's going to win games.
It's a major bummer, not least of which because we could actually use him now. And in 2 months, and in 6 months when we're in the playoffs, because he's a guy who's been there, done that. He was a really important part of our success the last 2 seasons. And he's a veteran leader. Him and CP are the guys on the team that have spent the last 10 to 15 years like in and around the playoffs every season. It is really disappointing. And I'm kind of like Crowder signed two summers ago, winters for us in Australia. 2 off seasons ago for 27 million over 3 years, which was the mid-level exception at the time. Like, the cap's going up. Like, is he expecting to get a contract extension at more than the mid-level exception at like age 32, 33?
Yeah.
And if he's not, like, he's absolutely worth mid-level money. Like, in today's cap climate, like, the mid-level is like $11 million. Like, you just give him a 2-year, $11 million contract right now and call it a day. I mean, if he thinks that he's worth
20 or something,
even 15, like, I mean, like, come on, no one's giving you that money.
Yeah.
Particularly not if you're looking for years as well. But it is disappointing that there's been no kind of common ground to find here. Not even in this situation, because he would definitely be helping the team on a like a night to night level. It means we're going to see a lot more Torrey Craig, and Mikal Bridges, I think, played 41 minutes in the game after Cam went out. So we're going to be seeing Mikal taking a lot of that wing stuff, and then a mix of Craig, Damian Lee, and Josh Okogie kind of like filling in. And Lee and Okogie are, Cam is a definite 3-4. Lee and Okogie are definitely, 2-3s.
Lee's definitely a 2, man. And he, he's not fast enough for 1s, and he's not tall enough for 2s or 3s. Like Josh Okogie, like, now's your time. You've had 5-6 years of it. Now is your time.
Josh Okogie will like check in like for like bench minutes in the first quarter and get like 3 steals in 4 possessions, and then you're like, oh my god, this guy's an absolute monster. And then you check his stat line at the end of the game, and it's like 13 minutes, 0-4, 3 turnovers, 3 steals, but not a lot else.
Yeah, I mean this in the worst possible way. He's a poor man's Mark Wicked-Gilchrist.
Fucking hell. Yeah, no, he actually is.
Do you want to mention anything? Or maybe just before we move on, how do you feel about your title chances? Do you feel like you're 5% less likely to get a title?
No, I feel like our title chances, our performance from like March onwards next year has not really taken that much of a hit. What has taken a hit is our ability to lock up home court in the postseason in round 1. Like obviously we're top of the West currently.
You'll never sing that.
Actually, I think after yesterday, Utah is. So we're second in the West, and this injury will hurt us. I think, especially as like a few of the other teams that have struggled to slow starts, like find their footing a little bit, and maybe make up some ground on us whilst Cam's out. But I don't think like come the end of next season that we'll be like a worse team because of this.
Next piece of news comes from Bill Simmons of The Ringer while speaking with Kevin O'Connor, saying that there is some buzz around the league that Anthony Davis might be available in a trade. This is very Bill Simmonsy, but also, to be fair, everything he does say, I believe as a report. He might report 2 things a year, but you trust that he's like speaking to the right people.
Yeah.
Anthony Davis on the trade block. I feel like we've been sort of talking about this when we watch basketball together and sort of murmuring a little bit, being like, oh, okay, like, Russ is hard to trade. What about Anthony Davis? But then Anthony Davis has been playing pretty poorly. So what did you think when you saw this report, Dante?
Oh, this would be like the biggest like veiled departure from what we know a team has been trying to do for the last year, which is like move Russ. This would be an absolute shock if there is actually have been any discussions around this. It would be a massive departure from the team building philosophy that they've kind of like established. And you said it, the biggest difficulty here is that Anthony Davis has actually been playing shit for like an extended period of time now. And he's actually one of the more difficult like trade assets in the NBA to kind of value, because like he didn't make an All-NBA or All-Star team last year. He'd be 29 now.
He is 29 years old.
He's 29 years old. So what team is giving you an All-NBA level player back in exchange for Anthony Davis?
I think they have to realise that they're not getting an All-NBA level player back. And that there was a follow-up report, follow-up as in the same conversation with Kevin O'Connor, who said that they would prioritise cap space in any returning package think most teams in the whole entire NBA would prioritise cap space if they're making a trade whatsoever, especially if you're the Lakers and cap space work so much for you.
But then who's taking Anthony Davis into their cap space? Who has the cap space and an Anthony Davis need or want that the Lakers can trade with?
What I immediately thought, as soon as I saw this, and as soon as you leave, you can peep at my
I'm trying to pepper your screen and see what team you just had. Shawnee's on the bloody trade machine.
I'm on the trade machine because as soon as I wrote this in the run sheet today, I was like, as soon as I get home and as soon as I finish this podcast with Dante, as soon as I celebrate a little with my housemate whose birthday it is, I'm getting on 2K and I'm going to make this trade just to see what's happening. Heaps of stuff's going to have to happen to make this work, including a couple of free agents. But a trade to the Bucks, that's the only thing I could think of. A trade to the Bucks based around Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis, and Grayson Allen, which the money works, can't be consummated until January 15th.
That is not a return.
I think that's the best return you can get.
That's a fucking...
Okay. I haven't mentioned the picks. Let me fully say that.
Okay.
Bucks give up every pick they can, which I think would be like 20, 28, and then a swap in 29 because they're so hamstrung by previous trades they've made. But like, if you prioritise cap space for reasons we'll talk about, which you wrote some of the key free agents coming up, they're prioritising cap space and they just want shooters and role players to make Russ work, right? Russ and LeBron, obviously. You need as much shooting around them as well as you can get.
LeBron is the worst volume 3-point shooter in the NBA this season.
And Russ isn't far behind him.
Yeah.
Having a centre like Brook Lopez there, just get a shooter in Grayson Allen who might be their best shooting guard on the roster, right? Just get role players for Anthony Davis, and it is such dire straits that in LA that it's like just do it, and we'll hopefully figure it out. Because you're not winning a title today as this team stands, and if you trade Russell Westbrook, you're not going to get a massive package in return for him. So if you can turn Anthony Davis into a couple of good role players, Bobby Portis, everyone thinks he's better than I think he is, but if you think he's good, obviously there's something there as well. What do you think about a potential Bucks package? We haven't even talked about the Bucks, by the way.
Well, I've been thinking about the Bucks ever since you said it. I mean, if you want to talk yourself into Anthony Davis' defensive presence, which I'm not sure you can reasonably do and have a leg to
Giannis
stand
will paper
on,
over it.
based on the last 18 months of Anthony Davis's defensive presence.
Yeah.
But if you do want to talk yourself into that, I mean, fuck, that's a front line that no one want to match up on.
Yeah.
Davis and Giannis at the 4-5. And then thinking about how that would work on offense. Now the Bucks would have 2 7-footers who are both at their best when they're attacking the rim aggressively, who love to settle for jump shots. Because Davis, fucking, we know he can go toe to toe with Giannis for settling for stupid jump shots. I mean, that'd be awesome for the Bucks. Like all jokes aside, once the inevitable growing pains kind of were surpassed, if Davis is Davis and not, and this just isn't who he is, because we're now 2 full seasons removed from him being like a dominant player.
Yeah.
In years that are supposed to be his prime years, it's not like he's 32 and we're talking like, he's
an old guy.
Have we seen the last of it? Like, is the end final? Like, this guy has been bad as a 27, 28, and 29-year-old. So
What number do those numbers start with?
They fucking start with 2, bro.
Yeah.
For the Lakers, so all right, this trade and you're saying any trade that they're going to make is going to be prioritizing cap space.
Yeah.
You got to imagine the off season of 2023, because I don't know if you checked
LeBron.
I don't know if you checked what number LeBron's age starts with, but it almost starts with a 4. It's getting very close to starting with a 4. So next off season, the guys who are either coming up or have a player option for 2023-24 that they could decline, who might figure into the Lakers' plans if they want to do a quick retool and then focus on free agency. Chris Middleton, James Harden, Kyrie Irving, woof, Kristaps Porzingis, Fred VanVleet, Nick Vucevic, Jeremy Grant, and Miles Turner could all be free agents next offseason. You got to imagine that Middleton and Harden are going nowhere.
Yeah.
Do you want to take a stab on Kyrie or Porzingis as your trade away Davis and then
Yeah.
kind of like retool, and then Vucevic, Grant, and Turner are all kind of like
Sub-all-star.
good starter type
Yeah.
players who aren't really going to get it done. So that leaves one player on that list who I think is both good, would be a good like business decision for the team to invest in, and might theoretically want to opt out of his contract and come to LA, which is Fred VanVleet. And that doesn't really move the needle that much. If you told me like I could have Anthony Davis now, or the chance at getting Fred VanVleet in 8 months' time, I would keep Anthony Davis.
Yeah, because you do have to win games today. It's pretty grim. I mean,
not for nothing, this team is 2-8.
but those 2 wins, they've been the loudest 2 wins I've ever seen.
Crip has been jumping.
But to be fair, you got to give it to other teams for winning more than 2 games.
Pat on the back.
Like, for real.
The 3-win Orlando Magic looking really good here.
I don't know if you've been on the Bluebird after a Lakers win, but it's just like, man, Russ has figured it out. He's sneaking these little layups in. He rocked the baby. Like, they were up 20-9 against the Cavs.
Yeah.
And then the Cavs were just like, hold on a minute, we're better than you. And then just won the game.
Yeah.
But everyone's like, man, the Lakers, like, you know, they got that win. This is like, every single win for Lakers fans is like, we've just turned it. We've just turned the corner. We've just turned the corner. 2 wins. Like, the Kings have 4, and they start off 0-5.
Yeah, and everything in our group chat about the Kings has been like almost universally negative.
I'm the only one who fucking watches them. Which I said I would.
watched them. I watched them the other day. I watched them against whoever the fuck Fox hit that buzzer beater against.
Yeah.
I can't even remember that. It was Orlando.
And they're a good team.
Also, by the way, like the worst defending on that fucking buzzer beater by Orlando.
Yeah.
They just were like, okay, if you want to shoot an open shot, you can shoot it. Guy, why don't you put your hand up?
Yeah,
I think it was Suggs was just like standing
Maybe
there.
they thought it was halftime and it was just like a heave.
Yeah.
We'll wrap up the Anthony Davis chat in a second, but just like we said we'd watch the Kings early in the season, and we have. My one takeaway from this early season is that Sabonis is nowhere as good as other big men.
Did we say we would watch the game?
I did, and you made fun of me. But you've just said that you've watched a couple.
I watched one game.
Okay. My takeaway was, fuck, Sabonis isn't that good.
Yeah, he's not.
What was your takeaway from watching them?
My takeaway was that their role players are actually pretty good. Finally, they've actually got okay role players.
Kevin Huerter got fouled by Klay Thompson on that, and
that's very big of you to admit.
He whacked him with the left hand, and then he cut under his legs, and then he pushed his elbow out so he couldn't pull it off.
Where I'm from, we call that a love tap play on.
Now, honestly, like, I don't want to incite violence here, but I would get rather angry at the people wearing grey shirts if you don't call that.
Yeah.
Like, and how to... I was actually, as a Warriors fan, I was like,
well, easy there, Tiger.
Come on.
There have been some like very bad NBA refereeing decisions leading to game altering events. The league also came out and said that Jeremy Grant travelled on his game-winning jump shot against Phoenix.
I could have told you that.
Yeah, it fucking looked like it. The guy looked like he was in the middle of like PE class, and his teacher was like blowing the whistle in between like doing like sprints, but you had to be like jogging on your toes, running on your toes, like standing still. He's like, and then someone just passed him the ball, and he was like, "Oh shit, I better shoot," but not before taking 6 steps.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Anthony Davis. Do you reckon he's going to get traded this year?
Nah, because I mean that's pretty like seismic.
Yeah,
That's
and
seismic.
you're not going to get much.
No, I mean like he's.
Would you trade Anthony Davis for an unprotected 2023 Charlotte Hornets first round pick? And just matching salary.
Throw Terry Rozier in there as matching salary.
Yeah.
And a couple other blokes.
They've got cap space. Maybe Kelly Oubre.
So let's no. No, I wouldn't.
Who says no? The Lakers?
The Lakers.
Are you sure? Because what if you send Anthony
It's
Davis
Anthony.
over?
It's Anthony Davis.
But what if he gets injured?
It's Anthony
and then that's
Davis.
Victor Wembanyama.
I don't know, bro. That's the difficult thing with this is like it's Anthony Davis. The initials is AD. We know what that means from
After death.
2013 onwards. It actually stands for Anno Domini, but we don't need to get into that.
What's BC mean?
Common BC actually is an outdated term, and we use BCE now, which stands for Before Common Era.
Ah.
So the Common Era
is
after the birth of Christ,
Targaryen.
but they're not. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, before conquest. Anyway, I'm actually reading a book that's like loosely around the Bible at the moment, so I've very much got that stuff on the brain.
Yeah, right.
Wow, now I'm just thinking about all the fun things I'm learning in the book. Anyway, it's Anthony Davis. You can't trade him for like nothing. You know, like
Especially because you traded everything for him.
Yeah, it's a complete departure from your like team building philosophy, and I think it's I'll summarize my view by saying that I think it's a better bet that AD recaptures his form and goes on a run with LeBron like sooner rather than later, than you do this little pivot and trade him away and bring some other guys in, and then those guys and a year older LeBron like make the run that you want. Like LeBron is ticking. You kind of just have to go with what you've got at some point.
Yeah.
You can't be like, well, if we do this and this, then we might have a run in LeBron's age 40 season, because like no, it's never happened, and it's not going to happen with LeBron. We're seeing it now. LeBron has kind of turned the corner of not quite the guy that he used to be. And up until he was like 36, even last season, the way he started last season, we were like, oh, this is the guy. He's completely the same guy.
Yeah.
But now we're kind of saying that that's not actually the case. So I think you got to hold on to Davis and hope for the best.
Not to tout anything other than Deep 2, but Michael Pena of The Ringer had a really good article about how Father Time is chasing down LeBron James. It came out yesterday or today and sums up everything you've just said as well. Next piece of news is that Steve Clifford has invited Steve Nash in to, quote, spend a few days, unquote, with the Hornets, coming from Rod Boone of the Charlotte Observer. Rod Boone, welcome to your first ever news break on the Deep 2 NBA podcast.
You got big shoes to fill, Rod Boone.
The reason I'm talking about this is because when Steve Clifford got hired, we all looked around at each other in the group chat, being like, what the fuck? Why have
Steve?
Why have you just hired...
The same Steve as before?
Steve 1.0? And it was a little bit confusing, but this makes a lot more sense if Steve Clifford's maybe just because, obviously, we should give some context, they hired Kenny Atkinson. He agreed to become the Charlotte Hornets' next head coach, which I was over the moon with. And I said on this podcast, I thought it was an amazing hire. You know, get a young developmental coach who has only found gems in the rough in previous stops.
Uncut gems, you might say.
And then Kenny Atkinson reneged so he could puff his chest next to Steve Kerr 2.0. But yeah, if this is like, why would you report this, right? Why would you report this if not just you're super nice to Steve Nash, which there should be no reason why Steve Clifford or the Charlotte Observer are super nice to Steve Nash. So my theory here, and I want to put this out into the universe, because I think this is what's happening. Steve Clifford was hired as a bit of a placeholder where it's like, we know you're a known commodity, you don't have a job, probably not going to get another NBA job. Come in, we're going to pay you your full contract, right? And we just need you to sit there until we find someone who's a developmental coach who can come in and maybe, you know, whisper in the ear of one LaMelo Ball and try and teach him how to be an all-NBA guard. That guy could be Steve Nash. So I wouldn't be surprised if Steve Nash comes in and then maybe it's at the end of the year or halfway through the year or whatever the plan is to be like, okay, we did really want this developmental coach, this guy who we can grow with our roster, with our young roster, which might have a French kid on it at the start of next season. So I think this is...
Killian Hayes getting traded.
I actually shake my head there. That's a good one. Ismail Kamagate.
Yeah.
I think this is sort of like opening up the pathway for Steve Clifford to easily be just relieved of his duties.
I don't know why, but relieved of his duties makes it sound like he's done something wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, well...
Am I reading into this too much?
The flaw in your reasoning is that would require Michael Jordan to pay 2 NBA head coaching salaries.
They're still paying the last guy, aren't they? Who was the last coach?
Borrego.
Yeah.
He just didn't get his extension.
Yeah, right.
So Michael Jordan, famously one of the more stingy NBA owners, which is
yeah.
fair enough because on NBA owner
.net.
wealth rankings, he's essentially destitute compared to fucking Steve Ballmer. Michael Jordan has, potentially hundreds of millions of dollars. But by comparison, he's not one of the wealthier owners.
But
I don't know if you're
what
reading,
if he's doing the right thing?
I don't know if you're reading into it, but I think, is it possible that, it's Steve Clifford and we know that Steve Clifford is not someone who wants to be bad or someone who wants to tank, and Charlotte's 28th in offense through the early season, and the last time Steve Nash coached even remotely resembling a normal team, last season's Brooklyn Nets finished the season 8th overall in offense, and... you can give them a little bit of a bump from that because even by last season's standards, it was a bit of a clusterfuck in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
So you can say Steve Nash is, let's say, a good offensive coach. He might be a valuable assistant ad for Steve Clifford now to help the Charlotte Hornets' bad offense so that Steve Clifford's team isn't bad right now, which is famously what Steve Clifford has both been good at and entirely focused on. I guess it's just that, I've got my feet firmly planted on the ground, whereas you've always been a dreamer. And you're looking up at the stars thinking what might be with this caretaker role. And I think not for nothing, if Michael Jordan's doing his due diligence on caretaker, apprentice, passing the baton, in professional contexts around the world, he'll know that the last time a high-profile club did this, it was the Essendon Football Club. With John Worsfold and Ben Truck Rutten. And you can ask Marco, Lucas and Aless how that went with Ben Rutten taking over from the sage veteran mentor who had nurtured him on the bench in the coach's box. Didn't go well.
Yeah, I actually
and
don't
2
know.
years after, Truck's out.
Right.
So, I don't know. Maybe that's a bit of a warning sign here. Steve Nash, you could be... Nah, but real talk though, Steve Nash and the Mel.
What have we been
fun.
if not? Yeah, it would be fun. Man, I really don't like footy. Next piece. Oh, you want to give me on?
Well, I was just gonna say, before we move on to the next piece of news, should we take a break?
The deep two. God, that's a mouthful. Anyways, I'm Marco, co-host of the Hey, Daniel Gafford, what's the name of our podcast?
The JVG NBA Tribute Show.
Wow, I can't believe it's that easy. Thanks, Gaff. You probably know us as 2 members of the 4-Man Weave plus Marco, but we know you as our next listener.
Well said, Lucas. I gotta ask, how do we differ from the Pack of Basketball podcasts?
It's a great question, Marco. You see, on our basketball podcast, we have 2 male co-hosts.
Wow, truly groundbreaking. After this episode, stay on your favourite podcasting app and give us a spin.
I didn't say yes, but we did take a break, funnily enough, and you know that as the listener at home because you hear the edited version. But
Thanks, Carly, been on one.
Last final piece of news before we move on to something I've been seeing, which might shock you, is that coming from Kobe Price of the Orlando Sentinel that
Is
Jonothan
Kobe
Isaac...
Price another debutant on the Deep too?
No, actually he's not.
He's not.
Because he breaks all the Johnny Isaac news.
Yeah.
Jonathan Isaac has returned to 5-on-5 work. The last time he played basketball was on August 2nd in 2020 in the NBA bubble. He stood for the anthem before the game. He's written a book since then.
Yeah.
You've drafted him in fantasy since
I
then?
didn't draft him, but as soon as the draft was
Did you
over,
pick
I was
him
onto
up?
the fucking waiver wire to use him with one of my injury exception
Fuck,
spots.
that makes me less likely to want to trade you Ben Simmons for him.
Oh, we'll talk about it.
Maybe we'll make it a 5-for-5 kind of. What are your thoughts on John Isaac returning to, let's call it the court?
Well, I mean, first of all, Fruit Loop. Second of all, he was at one point like a genuine defensive player of the year candidate. That season where he tore his ACL, he through the first let's say 40 games of that season, he was absolutely tearing it up.
Yeah.
That was 2019-20, where he was averaging 2.3 blocks per game with 1.6 steals, which is pretty mental.
Pretty fucking hard.
Playing the 4 for that Orlando team. I mean, it's impossible to really predict or forecast what he looks like, and the fact that they've got a backlog at the 4 and the 5 with Wagner can play some 4. You've got Banchero, you've got Bamba, Carter Jr., Bobo, Chuma Okeke's still there. All of these guys who've actually played NBA minutes in the last 2 years are all ahead of him in the depth chart. So even when he's back healthy, he's still got to surpass. Let's be optimistic and say he surpasses 4 or even 5 of those guys. There's still another 3 guys in the rotation ahead of you. So I think the chance of him having a meaningful role in this team this season is pretty low.
Yeah. Let's just move on. So observations. We'll talk about what I've seen because I want to talk about what I've seen. Is that the Golden State Warriors? Shock and awe. Sean's talking about the Warriors, but the Golden State Warriors, Steph Curry and Draymond Green are in peak form. Steph Curry is absolutely killing it. Over 30 points a game. I think it's like 5 and 5. Shooting a million. Splits that have never been seen before. Draymond Green, honestly, again, a Defensive Player of the Year candidate.
Mr. Triple Single.
Everyone else. Actually, can I say, I actually want to take that a little bit. Draymond Green's been scoring a little bit more than he usually does.
What do you think?
Still single digits.
What do you think his points per game average for this season is?
You know what? I'm going to talk about a lot of stats, but not one of those stats led me to Draymond Green's page.
Well, I'll tell you what. You actually are. I just checked it. You actually are correct. He has been scoring a little more than he usually does. He's
Where's you cheeky?
9.1. And the reason why averaging 9.1 points per game is a little bit more than he usually does is because he hasn't actually scored in the double digits in the last 6 years. No, I'll fact check myself. 5 years.
You know what happened 5 years ago? He shot like 36% from 3.
Nah, you're talking 7 years ago, Buster. Get your bloody Warriors trivia up to scratch. Nah, but he is also shooting 60% from the field this season.
Yeah, what number does that start with?
I don't know. Whenever it starts with it, it's pretty high.
Anyway, Steph and Draymond really good, and they're just keeping the starting lineup. Like, even if Klay Thompson's still slowly coming back into it, Andrew Wiggins has been as passive as ever. Kevon Looney, he is just a role player. That's just who he is. They're fucking Steph and Draymond are keeping this starting lineup. Our starting lineup is one of the best starting lineups in the whole entire league. We are playing amazingly. But we just can't do anything when either of these dudes sit. And it used to be that, and the theory was heading into this season was that, okay, Jordan Poole, you're the guy. You've got this massive extension. That wasn't a joke. You actually just had a cough.
Sorry. Yeah, pardon me. That was very rude.
Jordan Poole is struggling to be the hub of the offense off the bench. And he, in the past, he hasn't been killing the world when he's been with the bench units, but he's just been keeping them afloat. And keeping them afloat is even cooler when you can mix in with the starters and just be that cool, fifth starter in the death lineup. But he hasn't even been doing that in the starters as well. 2 stats I want to cherry pick at the moment is that Jordan Poole last season for the whole entire year last season for the whole entire year. When Steph Curry was off the court, Jordan Poole kept the Warriors at a plus 0.3 net rating and had them at a 111.4 offensive rating. Both of those numbers were somewhere between 50 and 60 in the 50th and 60th percentile. This season, small sample size, but a bad sample size. In 2023, while Jordan Poole plays without Steph Curry, the Warriors are a negative 19 per 100 possessions.
Now that's bad.
It's actually the second worst number in the whole entire league. And the Warriors have a 97.7 offensive rating. That is the worst among all guards in the whole entire league.
That's positively processed sixes, Ian.
Yeah, literally. Pretty fucking shit. Jordan Poole, you can understand maybe a little bit of growing pains, just cashed out, etc. But this is very bad, and he's not making his shots. He's taking good shots. He's had a couple of carries, which it wasn't a point of emphasis for the refs, but it seems like it was for Jordan Poole, and they have been carries. I'm not trying to defend him there, but everything's going wrong for him at the start of the season. So Jordan Poole's struggling.
Have you mentioned that he got punched in the face by his teammate in training camp?
I actually didn't mention that. I
sounds like something wrong for you.
I wasn't going to. But on top of that, like, we're missing Jermichael Green a little bit. Who, yeah, I mean, he's missed like a game or something. But we're missing Dante DiVincenzo, who, you know, like, he's a veteran and he's missed this whole entire road trip. But he was available for the taxpayer mid-level exception because he wasn't that good. It's like, okay, we shouldn't be struggling.
He was available for the taxpayer mid-level exception because he wasn't available.
Huh?
That's why he was available for the taxpayer mid-level exception.
Oh, because he's
always hurt.
No, it just clicked. Anyway, but he was pretty bad last year, right? So he's not saving your bench.
He was bad last year.
Andre and
because
didn't play
he's coming
much.
back from a long-term injury and then got injured again and then played through injury, and of course he's going to be bad.
I mean, okay. I've been watching him. He hasn't been that incredible. But Andre Iguodala still hasn't played a game of basketball yet, but he's like 52, and like, I know he had some incredible numbers last season when he was on the court, but like, you know, don't rest all your fucking bench consistency on Andre Iguodala. And this is the crossover between the two windows. This is what we've been talking about for years now. This is like, if you want to hear about Dante and I talk about the two windows, watch a game of Warriors basketball today, because you are literally seeing it. You've got the starters, who are one of the best lineups in the world of basketball today, and the bench, which are just getting played because of where they were drafted and because we have excised almost everything else because it's their turn. And as soon as it's their turn, they're bad at basketball. It is black and white between the two lineups. And Steve Kerr 2.0, who is trying to do everything he can to just make at least one or two of these dudes pop. He's mixed in Big Jim with the starters. He's mixed in Ty Jerome with the starters. He's mixed in Anthony Lamb with the starters. Jonathan Kuminga's in the doghouse for whatever reason, I don't know. He doesn't set hard screens and he doesn't run any play. He's mixing in Moses Moody with the starters. He's trying to do all of this, but even when you're sharing the court with Steph, Clay, and Dre, you are still Ty Jerome, right? Sometimes things just happen. And it's just, like, it is so... Like, I think I'm going to write about this soon, because it is such perfect imagery of the two windows, and I just really want the young dudes to get good, but it doesn't look good right now, because Steph checks out, early in the second quarter, and then misses most of the second quarter. And he's just got to work so hard to dig us out of these holes. And he's literally doing it. He's digging us out of these massive holes. And it hasn't been enough so far. I think, whatever, 4-7 on the season, or whatever it is. It hasn't been enough. Draymond Green is in peak form. Slinging punches, blocking shots, putting his hand in passing lanes. And as soon as he sits, it's like, okay, Kevon Looney, again, role player, but no one else is making up for it. And it's like, something's got to drop here. Bob Myers spoke to Tim Kawakami of The Athletic, asked him a couple of questions. There was a quote here where it goes, quote, "I've learnt watching our teams over the years, the ebb and the flow of rotations, how it starts is not always how it ends. Clearly, Dante DiVincenzo will be back, and Andre Iguodala at some point. And what will that do to the rotations? Obviously, that's the thing you're going to say if you've just spent the last 2 years committing to this two windows mantra. But I just wonder, when the trade deadline comes, if we're still where we are right now, it's like, we need to upgrade. We need to upgrade the role players. We need to bring in a veteran, because we're not winning a championship right now. And when we were talking about it in the offseason, it's like, oh, damn, you lost Gary Payton. Okay, it's for money. You know, it is what it is. We've got the two windows. Okay, you've lost JTA, whatever, minimum. You've lost Damian Lee, whatever, minimum, right? But that's a lot of veterans that were just going out there and just playing basketball games and just being passable players. And now we don't have passable players coming off the bench. And we need to... we're fully committed to it. And hopefully they just get better at basketball. Because right now, we're not winning basketball games with bad players.
Yeah, but I mean, like... You know, I hear you, but it was never going to be a guarantee that you'd leap out of one window and into the next window standing vertically.
But my whole basketball life, we've just won.
Well, that's... Yeah, I'm acutely aware of the fact that you have enjoyed nothing but success. There's going to be growing pains. I mean, like Moses Moody isn't just going to become like a top 14 shooting guard in the NBA. Like
you denounced him on opening night last year.
Denounced him. I announced
him.
He's not just going to become like a great starter, like just because you're like, okay, now we are relying on you. It doesn't happen like that. Kaminga, the same thing. Like, just because you're like, okay, like maybe we'll give the young guys a go, doesn't mean Kaminga's going to be great immediately. But you've seen what Kaminga can do. You've seen what Moody can do. It's 11 games into the season. You'll be fine. Something will click, the young guys will get it, and then you'll go on this.
We just need one young guy to get it, and we need Jordan Poole to hit his shot. I think you can
which you will. You have to believe that you will.
I definitely think he will. I just wonder if, let's say, Jordan Poole becomes his prime player tomorrow, is that enough to paper over the rest of that bench lineup? And do we need to sign? I mean, Dwight Howard's in Taiwan now, but obviously he said, I could come in there and be your backup 5. Like, do we need to sign just a veteran centre whose name isn't Jermichael Green, who's just not tall enough to protect the rim? Do we need to sign a veteran 5 just to be like, okay, cool, pick and roll partner with Jordan Poole, everything will work around that? I don't know.
I just would preach patience as a mantra here.
As someone who's watched Elie Okobo for multiple games yourself, be patient.
Holy fuck, that's a deep cut that I didn't need. The painful days of the 17 to 19 Suns. Whilst you were talking, I was just reflecting on the fact that we've hit all 3 NBA head coach Steves. We hit Kerr, Nash, although recently deceased NBA coach, God rest his soul, and Clifford in the same episode. Look at us. It's a Steve Nanza.
Well, yeah, I didn't reference Steve Kerr 1.0. That wouldn't be in 4.
No, but you said...
They're different guys.
No, you said one of them.
I said one of them. Yeah, well, awesome. Do you want to... What are we looking up for time?
Oh, we're looking like we could wrap up.
All right, well, I'll just squeeze it in there because you've crossed it out and you told me to cross it out. But the Celtics are granted a $3.23 million disabled player exception for Danilo Gallinari's injury coming from Shams of The Athletic. You don't get an additional roster spot for a DPE. All right, you want to wrap it up?
Oh my god. Well, thanks for listening. It's been an absolute delight to bring you this podcast, as it always is. But on a beautiful sunny day, drinking a cold one with my friend and podcast adversary, it's been real. So thanks for chatting ball with me, Sean. And for all the listeners, thank you too. Make sure you jump over to YouTube and check out Lucas's video on the Minnesota Timberwolves offense. And jump over to thedeep2.com and have a squiz at Sean's article about the Cleveland Cavaliers. We'll be back at the regularly scheduled time next week, so until then, enjoy.
Peace. If you look for PointsBet's stock exchange listing, you'll find a bucket of jargon and doublespeak as they're considered a, quote, wagering services operator, unquote. That's a corporate stretch for the colloquial friendly brogan or, hey, look, it's Chris Bosh kind of image they're sending off with their targeted advertising. I don't know about you, but take me back to the days when former pro sports players signed brand deals with hair loss clinics or Fujitsu aircons, not, quote, wagering service providers.
If you're scrolling through your Facebook feed and you come across the 2 of our faces morphed into one, would that make you listen to our podcast more? I mean, if it does, let us know and we'll start doing it. But when I see a few NBA players' faces morphed into one, it doesn't make me want to pull out my wallet and donate some money to my local wagering services provider.
The worst part is we're coming to accept it. Wagering service provider ads are so ingrained in our sports and the way sports is delivered to us, it's almost impossible to avoid. 3/4 of Australian children aged between 8 and 16 years who watch sport think that betting on sport is normal and can name one or more sport betting companies. When I was in school, I was struggling to remember Pokemon names, and I'd be furious if I knew that brain power was being used to put towards wagering service providers and not them.
The wagering service providers know exactly who to target. It's not okay to let them ingrain themselves in young Australians' minds. It's not okay to target people in the middle of a pandemic, and it's not okay for gambling companies to wield so much influence in the world of sports. To help kick gambling out of sport, use your voice and sign the petition at www.endgamblingads.org.au/petition.